I've seen it growing.
Okay, here come folks now. Welcome in, welcome in. As we wait just a minute or two to start, everyone, if you wouldn't mind, and I need to turn on the chat for everyone. There we go. If you wouldn't mind putting your name and where you're calling in from in the chat, and make sure that it's addressed to everyone, just so we can, everyone can see it. While we're waiting for folks to pile in, I'll introduce myself. I'm Nick Hool. I'm the Director of Client Engagement at the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. I'll be running point, kind of MC, if you will, for today's conversation between our esteemed founder, Gary Schoniger, and Dr. Mildred Coyne, as well as Imran Siddiqui, both from Broward College. So super excited for this conversation. It should be a really good one. Right before we started, we were already having a lively one, and Gary and I kept saying, oh no, we got to save the good stuff for the live. So I'm glad we're here now.
It always happens. It happens in my podcast. Like people start ripping and rolling right from the get-go, and all the good stuff comes out before I can hit record.
Exactly. So just a couple housekeeping points before we get the conversation rolling. I'm going to turn my camera off in just a moment and let these three get to talking. But about 25 or 30 minutes in, I'll start bringing in questions from the audience. So if you have questions about anything and everything regarding what the conversation's about or other things you'd like to hear our guests speak about, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A. I'll be reviewing those as we go through, and then I'll pop my little whack-a-mole head out, and we'll have your questions answered, hopefully.
And Nick, sorry if I just overlooked this, but you're going to introduce our guests today, yes?
Well, I just named them.
Okay.
I can if you'd like. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. No problem. And then one other piece, I'll say this a couple more times, but just to make sure all our bases are covered. We are recording this, as you should have heard when you first joined, and we'll send that recording out typically within 24 hours, a little less of the end of the recording, or the end of the session, I should say, along with some helpful links, things like that. If I missed anything, y'all, let me know. But to get things started, we are joined today by Dr. Mildred Coyne, who's the Senior Vice President of Workforce Education and Innovation. She oversees Imran Siddiqui, the Associate Vice President of Workforce Education Employment Solutions. I probably could have said a lot more about both of you, but I want to let this conversation reveal some of those things. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Gary, Mildred, and Imran.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for setting all this up. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Mildred, you and I just met maybe a month ago at a conference at Broward College. I clicked right away with your messaging. I'm really excited to dig in. And Ron, you and I go back a few years here. You're a fellow entrepreneur leading the charge at Broward College, doing some really interesting work. This is going to be a fun conversation. It's going to be a very quick hour. And so what I want to just kind of start with is to let everyone know we want this to be a very interactive webinar. So comments, questions, suggestions, pushback, whatever you got, please throw it in the chat. I'm going to start the conversation 15 or 20 minutes in. Nick will pop his happy little face back up and start, kind of overseeing some of the Q&A. So Mildred, I want to jump in and start with you and ask you, what got you interested in entrepreneurship in higher ed?
Well, I think that's probably a loaded question for me, because I think a lot of things in my career I've tripped into. I haven't necessarily designed this really clear path and taking very logical, progressive steps to getting to my long range goal. So, it's typical thing that someone would ask you early on in a career, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And someone would have told me, 5 years ago that I'd be, where I am today, I would have said, oh, no way, or I wouldn't have been able to predict where I am, because I have always taken a very kind of iterative process to my own career. So for me, the entrepreneurial work started when I inherited a department at a college, as I was at the college while I was growing in my leadership at Broward College. I was now responsible for the incubator, the business incubator, which was really designed to support small businesses. There was an entrepreneurship component to it, but not really what you're seeing at Broward College today. So we spent, and it was also turned to me to make it profitable. Well, you know, that's a really daunting task when you're looking only at rent revenues and, you know, how you can ask a startup to pay a rent at a college for, you know, for what type of supports that they would necessarily need. We didn't have all the pieces in place to really have a robust revenue model. And so I really started looking at it from a perspective of, is this really the angle that we should be taking in higher education for entrepreneurship, supporting small business startups that are in our ecosystem?
What
And so-
arguments did you come up with against that? Why you shouldn't? I mean, can you recall any of that? Like,
But we weren't profitable. We weren't making any money.
Okay.
We weren't even breaking even. We were losing money trying to do that. And we had been doing it for a few years. And we weren't at a more basic level. We are a very mission-driven organization, meaning that we are all about transforming lives, and especially those that, because I believe it's for the greater good. It's for economic mobility for all. But then when we really further disaggregate that mission, we also feel very driven to support those that really are first generation and college student, low income students in many cases, really don't have the access that they should, right? And so we want to disrupt that and make sure that we're having equity and access and outcomes for all. And so when I started really looking at entrepreneurship, and I'm getting to an answer, I promise. When we started looking at entrepreneurship, I started saying, but we're not serving any of our students. You know, we have some 50,000 students in Broward College that weren't going to get access to that small business incubator. And so if we're putting resources into that, shouldn't it be about making sure our students have access to the ways that they can engage, to think about, they all have ideas, right? We know that they have ideas. I had ideas in college, you had ideas sitting in classrooms, but we don't know necessarily how to access the resources to turn those ideas into a reality of a business and to become a wealth creator for your family. Instead of a consumer of jobs, you're now a job creator.
right.
And so that's really what it turned my head. And I started really exploring, what does it mean for 50,000 students, at the time it was 63,000 students, to gain access to these great competencies that will turn their lives around and their families.
Yeah. So you kind of got pushed in the pool, and like no better person to have with you is Imran.
That's absolutely right.
Right. As someone who's not afraid of this kind of a challenge, or not afraid to roll up his sleeves and kind of jump in. And Imran, I know you got some entrepreneurial chops of your own. Can you give me, you know, the quick backstory on how you got to be, as Mildred said, an edupreneur?
Yeah, no, it's great to see you, Gary, and appreciate the time here. And Dr. Coyne is very humble. She doesn't give herself enough credit. She's as innovative a leader in higher ed as I've experienced, and we all follow her lead. And so I'm really grateful to work here. And I just want to say, I see some of the attendees on my team in the audience, so I love the Broward College representation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you, Gary. First off, you know, we love you. We love working with you guys. And I'm happy to share a little bit of my background. So a very non-traditional higher ed background, without a doubt. Trained as an attorney. I spent most of my career in doing campaigns, right? So either nonprofit or other types of campaigns. While I was in law school, a small band of us saw some stuff in the world that we wanted to try to address, and we started an email list, as often these things go, right? Just an email list among 5 people turns into whatever it was back then, whether it be a group or a chat. I can't remember the technology. It was like 2009. It turns into a nonprofit that we started. It was very unique. It was like a values-based digital organizing tool. It ended up getting scaled up pretty quickly and then ultimately acquired by Auburn Theological Seminary, where it currently stands. It's called Groundswell Movement. So it was a really interesting experience of just catching a moment, something growing really quickly, a really strong, committed team, like a common, founder story, right? There's a strong, committed team that are just putting in the time. And that little group of us began with that project and launched a few others. And then in between campaigns, I would do my own entrepreneurial work where I would provide some strategic consulting and just kind of contributing here and there in different ways to try to make our community better and stronger. And then at the right moment, Broward College came along. So I was just really grateful to bring all those unique skills into this institution to try to build up Dr. Coyne's vision for BCEx.
Yeah, that's good, Imran. And I hear this a lot in entrepreneur stories. I interview entrepreneurs all the time, and what I hear is like there's some efficacy moment in their life. There's some situation they're in where they realize they can make something happen. They can create something. They're not just fitting into an existing thing. And I think that lands in the brain in a way that sort of activates something that's innate in all of us. But one of the things that I wanted to dive into is kind of connect these stories in the work with it. Our connection with Broward College is your commitment to underserved communities and access, and which kind of jives with our commitment to, let's say, democratizing entrepreneurship, right? And that's really kind of what Ice House is all about, is kind of showing people this is not just the domain of the academic elite or the venture-backed high growth model of entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So, Mildred, can you talk a little bit about the BCEx program, or more broadly, maybe I should leave that to you, Imran, and Mildred, just talk about more broadly, like, what is it you guys are doing? Before we even press record, you and I got into a conversation that was super interesting to me around like workforce development and entrepreneurship. And I think that's one of the things that I keep saying, and I think you guys are on board with this, that we have to shift entrepreneurship from the perimeter of education to the core.
Right.
So,
well, I actually think that is what we're doing. And so
absolutely,
I'll just give you a little bit of a Cliff's Notes version of what we're calling our Broward Up work. So at Broward Ups, because we believe that everyone can achieve unlimited potential, not just those that can get to us, but also there's residents in our community that haven't been able to access us. So when I talk about equity and access and opportunity and outcomes, it's really that what we've done is that we've shifted our business model to get proximate to people that need us most. So instead of expecting our community members to all come to one of the 10 brick and mortar locations that Broward College has, we identified 6 zip codes, and now 11, that have the highest unemployment and lowest education attainment levels in our communities. And they happen to represent some of our highest populated cities, right? So what we did about 4 years ago when President Hale took office, and he's the absolute perfect leader for the right time at this community. He's galvanized all sorts of community support around his vision for this. We pushed out and called into our Broward Up work and gotten proximate to community members by partnering with community agencies and cities to offer free workforce training and development classes on locations, so in people's neighborhoods. And when I say free, they are free. And we also have case managers or career pathway navigators that help the community members identify their pathway, whether it's set an education plan and a career plan. And that's all free services. They also help them overcome any other social support services that are necessary. We link them to emergency funding or to childcare or food insecurity resources. And so we're really very intentional about helping people overcome barriers that have been blockades to economic mobility. And we really believe that entrepreneurship is a component of that. So when I say free workforce classes, we've certified or provided educational classes to some 3,500 community members for free in the last 4 years.
Wow.
And when we started this, we didn't have a blueprint. We didn't have a roadmap per se. We didn't take, the higher education way and take 4 years to study and do all sorts of research and detailed evidence. We had a sense of urgency, and we said, no, there's too many people that need us, that if we wait till we can grow capital to build buildings and do all the things that typically you would expect, we'd be leaving so many people in the margins. So we started a different way. And it's through partnerships that we've offered these classes, and entrepreneurship is a part of what we offer. Imran can tell you, you know, how many of our founders that have gone through our accelerator are from our Broward Up communities, or our Black and brown females that have been leveled up as a result of being able to access our free BCEx accelerator.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. Imran, I'll let you jump in just a second, but what's interesting, Mildred, what you're talking about is you know, I thought about this a lot. Like, there's two sort of forms of logic, and I will say, like, one is a managerial logic, which is, you know, I think I forgot the scholar's name, Sarah Sarasvathy calls causal reasoning, which is basically you have to know before you go. You figure everything out, and then you act on a plan. And that's prudent in some circumstances, but not every circumstance. In some cases, you need to operate on the opposite logic, which she called effectual reasoning, which means you have to go in order to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very entrepreneurial. We learn by doing, and we try things on a small scale and learn and adapt as we go. And I think, you know, as the rate of change continues to accelerate, everyone needs to understand that fundamental difference. Sometimes you need to adopt the know before you go strategy. It pays to look both ways before you cross the highway. Right? But what folks don't always understand is the inverse logic is appropriate in some situations. So I just wanted to put that in there. That's like a really entrepreneurial approach, whether you're aware of it or not. And I'm
completely aware, because we didn't have any money to start it either.
Well, okay. Now, and Imran, you could chime in here, but Mildred, let me throw a wrench out there. It's not a wrench. It's really sort of a counterintuitive thing that I believe, and I'll make my case if you ask me to, that the lack of resources actually works to the advantage of a typical entrepreneur. The resource constraints force them to focus on what people actually want and need, rather than adopting a build it and they will come strategy. So
absolutely agree.
Anyway, so Imran, I see you're chomping at the bit here to chime in. What do you got?
No, I mean, I think you're nailing it. I mean, so just so some of the attendees who aren't from our community are aware, right? So we offer the accelerator. We offer it free of charge. We offer it taking no equity from our participants, because exactly what Dr. Coyne just described, when it comes to our community and the Broward Up mission, there are already enough hurdles from our community, who are many, right, frankly speaking, middle to lower income. Many are underrepresented. Many are females, heavily, right, proudly, many female founders. They probably, many of them already think this world isn't for them. The images in their minds of entrepreneurs and startups look more like Bay Area bros.
Right, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg.
More the Bay Area than Broward County, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so what we are trying to do, not only with the academic work that we do with Broward Up, to say, listen, college is for you, and we're gonna help you out. And if you have needs, we're gonna help them. We do it with entrepreneurship as well. We say, listen, you can do this one. Two, we have knowledgeable partners, educators. And then I see our good buddy, Bob Nelson's in the room. We have great mentors that are gonna be there to help you along the way. And guess what, Gary, as we've discussed so many times, these are mentors that look like you, that talk like you, that come from neighborhoods like you.
That's huge. That's huge.
It's gigantic. And they're not going to talk down to you. They're going to say, listen, we know this is tough. Maybe you do have a family. Maybe you are a part-time student. Maybe you are a full-time employee. But, you know, this is how we're going to chart it out. So to say, you know, embracing failure is a big component of what we're doing, exactly what you described, which is telling our participants, we don't know where this journey ends, and wherever it ends is acceptable. You might decide in the week, this journey is not for me and my lifestyle. You might end up committing to your startup for multiple years, right? But you're going to at least give it a shot and give yourself a shot. And along the way, we, offer our services. Folks are finding a product market fit. We have a venture fund. This is not your traditional venture, VC kind of style fund. It's there to make sure that there's no hurdle from when they build out their business plan, their deck and their pitch deck, and they find product market fit. Okay, now I got to incorporate. I don't have $500 to incorporate. Okay, here's $500 to incorporate. Get off the ground. And like you're saying, you're asset light. Go make it happen. And a lot of our founders, many of who are in the room, are very driven, very capable, very hungry individuals that go and make it happen. And it's wonderful to see. And so I think you nailed it with the mindset component, right? Which is a huge, big goal of what we do, what you do. Ultimately, right, we offer the accelerator. That's 20 students a semester. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. We have an institution of 50,000 plus students. We have a community beyond that. We have faculty and staff, by the way, because we're not talking down to students. We're talking at all levels in a very flat format to cultivate that mindset. And I'd love to dive into that because that's the biggest vision and mission of what we do, because really on a macro level, right, we pump out students and we have an institution that is operating more innovatively, but we have students that are more creative, more dynamic, more hard, better communicators, better leaders, better colleagues. And whether or not they launch a business is irrelevant, but you know what? They're gonna dive into the workforce. So the theory is, if you have a secretary that thinks like a manager, how can you scale out impact from there?
Well, Imran, that's a great point. And Mildred, you and I were talking about this, like, beneath the skills gap, there's a mindset gap. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that I think there's a huge play in higher ed, specifically community colleges, to make that connection, that entrepreneurial attitudes and skills are the skills employers demand. They're the same thing. They call them soft skills. They have all these other names for it. But what it really comes down to is they want people who are self-directed, who are problem solvers, who are creative, critical thinkers. Right?
Absolutely.
Who can learn, unlearn, and relearn on their own. Those are entrepreneurial attitudes and skills.
Right. And so when we looked at Broward, BCEx, we really were, we just started with small faculty groups, and we're talking about what are the skills that we need our students to know, and how, well, we know that the entrepreneurial competencies that we espouse through everything, all the work in BCEx, was really what was going to take a person to be a more valuable employee. So whether they become, and Imran said it, whether they have their own business, whether they work for an entrepreneur, or whether they work in a Fortune 500, being able to be an entrepreneur is as important for many of our students and that as being able to start their own business, because then they're going to add additional value that employers we know are looking for. And so that just became really critical, I think, to making sure that for me it did, and then working with our faculty. So having the faculty completely align with that mindset it has just been pivotal to making sure that BCEx is something that isn't just for a few, but for all. And, we have some of our faculty here in the room, but, some of them have been faculty coordinators from the get-go, and where we've supplemented them to be those advocates and ambassadors within their disciplines, because we did not see entrepreneurship as just in the business pathway. We're a pathways institution, so we have 8 pathways that are that we can help students kind of think through their career journey. But having entrepreneurship only in business is not the way that we've approached this. We think that every student needs access to the competencies of entrepreneurship, whether they're in dental hygiene program or whether they're in the aviation maintenance mechanics program, because at some point in time, they might want to hang a shingle themselves, right? Right. And so how can we make sure that we give them those competencies, whether they work for themselves, work for others? Yeah, and that ties into to my work, in my thinking, Mildred, which is I'm interested in the mindset, like the underlying beliefs and assumptions. And this is the tricky part. Like, I've been studying entrepreneurship sort of like an anthropologist might, right? Like, I'm trying to get at the deeply held, mostly unconscious beliefs and assumptions. And the problem is that the entrepreneurs don't know what they know. If you ask an entrepreneur, how did you do that? They're going to tell you, I worked really hard and I never gave up. Mm-hmm. So it's not that helpful. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is that, some people call it a work ethic, but at the core of the entrepreneurial mindset, in my view,
is this underlying, mostly unconscious assumption that I got to figure out how to make myself useful as possible to as many as possible in any situation I'm in, whether I work at a fast food restaurant or I want to change the world, anything in between. I think that's the core assumption. That's the basis for what some might call a work ethic.
Mhm.
And that's what I hear in entrepreneurs. You know, they start out with shitty little jobs, but they have that attitude, like, how do I maximize my utility? But they're
Yeah.
not aware of it, so they can't articulate it. And we make this mistake of looking at Imran and we think, oh, it's just Imran.
Mhm.
We assign that behavior to who he is. And by doing so, we overlook the underlying assumptions, which is where the gold is, really, where we can really get to understanding why he's behaving that way.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you know,
So,
Gary,
so for me, it's funny
actually,
because I've been a 30-year higher education practitioner, right? So I've not been a classic entrepreneur, but but I operate like an entrepreneur in that when I get put to a challenge or something that I want to do in the workplace, and then I have to ask other people for money or have to get it budgeted or have all these permissions to do it, I'm like, oh no, like I can't keep having to ask everybody else for money. So I needed money to do something. So I have to be entrepreneurial in the way I think about solving the problem. And Imran will know, like, well, first of all, like, I don't know that anyone's Imran's boss, honestly, but I think, like, he'll know that if he comes to me and says, well, he doesn't actually ever come to me and say, where am I going to get the money to do this? Because we just kind of figure it out and solve it and create the opportunity for ourselves, because we know that what we want, the roadmap where we're going is good. And we know that we have something that we want to impact. And if I'm waiting, and in a law of diminishing return, I'm waiting for the state to give us more money, why? I mean, nothing's going to happen. Or if I'm waiting for the college to be able to allocate or reprioritize resources to my interest in an opportunity that I see for our students, it's just going to diminish my opportunity for impact. So I agree with you that I think, people innately want to add value. And if I wanted to add value in what I see as an opportunity within the organization, and it's a big organization I've always worked in, higher ed space, that kind of wheels grind slow and change doesn't happen fast. If I'm waiting for all that, then the opportunities get lost. And so, that's why even within
But you
an
could take that,
organization,
Mildred, you could take that logic right down to the individual. I want to do cool things, but my boss won't let me.
Mhm.
That's an easy mindset to adopt. Totally understandable. Right? And that's what you guys are doing, is trying to, like, you're not only trying to help other people understand that, but you're embodying that
Mhm.
in your actions. Right? I'm not gonna, what I'm fond of saying, I think about it like this. And Imran, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. The managerial mindset, there's nothing wrong with that, looks above us for permission. Right? And a lot of entrepreneurship programs are kind of nested in managerial culture, and they're not very effective. But they teach people, like, somebody else needs to give you permission to proceed. Permission, from your boss, permission from a funder, permission from an investor, what have you. And what entrepreneurs figure out, without really understanding what they figured out, is that permission to succeed comes from the people whose problems you're trying to solve.
Mhm.
It's a horizontal model.
Mhm.
The person above me is not determining my path. The extent to which I can solve problems for other people is really where the permission is coming from. But and I know Nick is reminding folks, please put questions, comments in the chat. But like, let's address the elephant in the room here, guys, which is the immunity to change in higher ed.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you guys are really leading the charge in community college entrepreneurship, as far as I can tell. I mean, I work with a lot of community colleges. This is kind of what I do. How are you dealing with that? What does that look like in your world?
Well, Imran, I'm going to let you go into the details a little bit more, but I'll just say, like, from a philosophical standpoint, higher education has been disrupted, and if we don't recognize it, we're going to be dinosaurs. We're going to be left behind. And what I see as the BCEx is really setting us up as a differentiator in the marketplace, and allowing students that are looking for an opportunity and experience to see and to, oh, if I go to Broward College, I'm going to be able to bloom my ideas into a potential business. I'm going to be able to access an accelerator, access a mentoring network, an investment fund. I mean, those are differentiators for a community college or any higher education institution in the marketplace today, because those are the types of things that it's a different day that, we've been disrupted, and if we're not changing, we're dinosaurs. So Imran, I'll let you talk a little bit more about how how that really manifests at Broward.
I'd love to. No, I think there's a lot to respond to there. So Gary, great point about managerial mindset versus entrepreneurial mindset, because actually I feel like I came into Broward with a very strong entrepreneurial mindset, and Broward is helping me develop that managerial mindset, right? But I think the sweet spot is not when the worker in the traditional institution looks for approval, but when a great boss like Dr. Coyne looks to the worker saying, where do you want to go with this? What are your thoughts here? Like, I can honestly say Dr. Coyne never said, you got to do this. She said, here's the white paper. Go make it happen. You got it. I got your back. And then I come to her with zany ideas, and I push the zany on the envelope, right? And then she goes, okay, too zany. Let's back it up a little bit. And then that's how we work together. I think that's what, when I give presentations on BCEx, one of the first things I do is I have a bullet point of, like, what are our recipes to success? Like, how do you replicate this at your institution? Because we're very open. We host institutions all the time around our Broward Up model, which is revolutionary and has received Mackenzie Scott funding and Florida Department of Education funding. We're similarly open with BCEx because this strategy, this approach is open to everyone. And you got to have, frankly, you need senior leadership that's okay with a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of unknown. And we're very fortunate to have that here.
I think you're right on, Imran, and I want to come back to tie that to a comment that from Mildred's experience, which is that the fact that you guys were starving in the beginning is very, very important. And I'm going to lay this out in a way that might be counterintuitive. But I see initiatives all the time that start with a bunch of money and a fancy building and all this stuff, the foosball tables and the coffee bar and whatnot, and there's crickets chirping in there. And I think this goes back to my point that the resource constraint work to your advantage. What you got to do is create a building and find an Imran and a Mildred and go, here you go. You guys go make it happen. And that builds a much more robust, community-centered organization. I have a friend, Jim Carell. This guy was teaching entrepreneurship in a college at Independence Community College in Independence, Kansas. There's 10,000 people in the community. The president of the college gave him an empty 10,000 square foot building, used to be a Cessna engineering lab, and said, I'll keep the lights on and pay your salary. You figure it out. The guy, the guy found himself an Imran and literally raised $1 million from the community, built a whole new building. It's got this thriving makerspace entrepreneurship ecosystem that's transformed this little community, created dozens of businesses. It's the same phenomenon that you guys are onto, and whether you know it or not. I found this great quote from Peter Drucker, and he said, every practice rests on a theory. Whether or not the practitioner knows it, it's irrelevant. Right. And that's kind of been my work is, I'm interviewing entrepreneurs and I'm looking for the common controllable factors in their beliefs and in their behavior. And there is this a repeatable phenomenon, that it's not just that people have these traits and that's what causes them to behave this way. So let me shut up and ask Nick, are there comments, questions, anything in the chat yet for people to, I want to make sure I don't dominate the Q&A.
Sure. I just want to highlight a question that Eva asked that I did respond to so everyone could see. But if you have any inquiries about using Eli's programs, you can feel free to email me. My email's in the chat. If you want to learn more about BCEx and everything they're doing, you can email bcex@broward.edu. So that's just one little housekeeping note. We had a nice comment early on about the importance of entrepreneurship being critical to building a strong and vibrant community. And I wondered if you guys had more to say about that, about how entrepreneurship kind of creates vibrancy in community. It isn't just serving the entrepreneur, but everyone around them.
100%.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead,
Yeah.
Imran, because I think
Yeah,
that's
no. Well, I just, so much of what both of you, Gary and Nick, just said resonates, right? Really quickly, because I can go on sometimes, but really quickly talking about not being asset heavy when you launch, right? We launched fully virtually it wasn't our choice when we launched. We launched mid-COVID. We were ready to go in person, but we went fully virtual. And it's been incredible because you know what? You don't have the pressure of, as many institutions do, like you said, Gary, is the pressure of fundraising early on. Because when you're asset light, you can build an authentic community that meets your founders and your supporters, what meets their needs and meets them where they're at, which naturally draws attention from private grant money, philanthropic entities, things like that. And so it allows you to really more authentically build an ecosystem. And so that was an unbelievable blessing. So if any folks are listening who are considering it, I really wanted to just echo what you said about not going the asset heavy model and thinking a big, beautiful space is the way to go. The second thing, Gary, you've been very humble. You haven't gone into at all how we've worked together in your curriculum in a lot of the work that we've done, especially our ideation component, where students are diving into a journey of self, using the 8 life lessons to find themselves and their passion, and then building their startup from there. And just what a great partner you've been. So I want to just let you and the team, Nick and Joni, know, just what a pleasure it's been. I really encourage other institutions to get involved because really your curriculum, your team, has been really great, and I think you get it. I think you get the mindset component very, very well, and what it means to be an institution, a traditional institution, diving into those matters.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, Imran. And I think where you and I have worked well together is like you understand entrepreneurship pretty well. Like you don't you really don't need our help, Imran specifically, but you guys have brought us in several times now to train faculty, and that's really what we do well, to sort of help broaden the understanding of entrepreneurship beyond just the startup realm, to help the broader faculty understand what we mean. When I think of the word entrepreneur, I mean, a lot of people recoil from that word, specifically in higher ed. Right? There's a casual contempt for entrepreneurship that people don't want anything to do with it. Now, that's business. That's not for me. And I think it's important for folks to understand, look, the word entrepreneur arose 250 years ago at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, when for the first time in human history, we needed a word that would distinguish the person who organized and operated the business from the person who worked in the business. That's where the word came from. And I'm arguing that distinction is rapidly evaporating. It's becoming irrelevant. These underlying and these antiquated underlying assumptions rooted in the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, that one person is going to figure it all out and everybody else is going to do what they're told, is just becoming obsolete. And that's how we're, working with folks like you. I hope that we can continue to shift the conversation from the perimeter to the core of the way education operates.
Yeah.
Well, and just thinking about the core of education. And so, we've even really taken this to where we're considering how all of our students get to experience the competencies that are a part of the entrepreneurial mindset. We have a general education task force because general education is the core of whether you're getting a workforce degree, there's general education courses and all your then technical skill sets that you learn. But then for your Associate of Arts degree, which is your general AA degree that's designed for transfer to your bachelor's degree, there's a lot of energy, time, and resources spent on the general education component. So we have faculty committed to really making sure that the general education outcomes at Broward College are what students need no matter where they're going to go. So whether they're going to get a workforce degree, whether they're getting a transfer degree, but we have faculty members that are on that gen ed task force that are that have gone through training with you, Gary, that are very entrepreneurial minded, but are teaching a lot of our general education disciplines like philosophy, humanities, English, or our communications area, as well as any of the other math or science disciplines, and are part of our entrepreneurial work. And they're helping to make sure that the competencies that all of our students have are related to what they're going to need for success in their post-Broward College experience, whether that's in work or at a transfer. And so that's a really important part of getting to the core of higher education and how we're impacting students, because it's not them only being strong in their discipline of reading, writing, math, right? Those days are gone. They have to have those competencies. Those are an expectation of higher education.
That's table stakes.
Yes, but you have to have the other competencies that are going to make you a valuable member of society. And your input with. That's
super important, Mildred. And I think the way I think about mindset is that like mindset is to a person what culture is to a group. Right? It functions exactly the same way. Our mindset enables us to think without thinking. And so our mindset works very well when the future looks like the past. But our mindset gets us all kinds of trouble when the future doesn't look like the past, right? And that's part of the challenge that we're trying to get to. But what I'm really trying to get to is that, we're so steeped collectively in a managerial paradigm or an institutional paradigm, let's say, that the entrepreneurial mindset looks like an anomaly. And what we're trying to do in our work is I learned from, the study of culture from Edgar Schein, which is like you can't understand someone else's mindset until you can understand your own. Right? And so what we're trying to do is help folks like get at these deeply held beliefs and assumptions and bring them up into the light and look at them again and say, wait a minute, is this really the way we should be doing it? It made sense at one point in time, but it doesn't make any sense. So let me get to the point. I have these conversations a lot with folks in higher ed, and I keep hearing this term about like career paths. And I like to ask people, like, tell me what you mean when you say career path. Because I'm trying to tease out the level 3 assumptions of which they may not be aware. And what I'm getting at is there some underlying expectation of linearity, of consistency, of predictability, of other directedness, because that world doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So I think it's like it's an important question to ask. You can still use the word career path, but as long as you understand, that's going to look much more like, Dr. Coyne's career path rather than it is, a guy who comes out of school with a 4.0, goes to law school, and off they go. Right.
I definitely think it's all a part of the disruption of our higher education model across the country and the way that people are consuming education. It has to, it started, really happening with the onslaught of online learning, right? And so,
Right.
but even then, like in those early days of online learning, oh, it's not nearly as meaningful as being in a face-to-face classroom in the traditional model of education. But, you know, we've gotten better and better and better at those things. But I mean, I think about what you're saying about linear career paths. I mean, even our 8 pathways, we're pathways, like I said that, you know, we have 8 pathways. They help students to be able to make some informed decisions early on so that they can make sure that their credit accumulation doesn't get out of whack with what their ending direction is going to be. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they're only going to experience and be exposed to everything that's only in the business pathway. So for example, I mean, there should be interdisciplinary degrees that we should be offering, and we might get there. This is my dream, right? So that it's not just a degree that's from the business pathway or from a business degree, but it's a business and an information systems or an information science degree that's married together, that isn't just from one pathway. And it's harder for because higher education is rooted in tradition that goes way back to, you know, the Middle Ages, really, when you think about it.
Truly. Yep.
But then there's even a lot of things, like when I think about what you said about, you know, we have always done some things the way that we've done it. Higher education for me was incredibly frustrating as a first generation college student with no resources, right? Nobody could help me. No, I have a big family, but nobody knew what I was going through or knew how to help me. And they were like, if you're going to do that, go ahead. I can't help you. And so, but even navigating our pathway, like navigating our systems, it's like a rite of passage in this country. If you can get through the wires and the network and the crazy hurdles that we make you jump through to get into a class, then you're halfway there. But
don't even get me started.
Disrupted, right? That all needs disrupted. All the things that we put in the way.
You know, Mildred, I'm working with a college in LA on that very topic. Like, there's so many barriers to entry that are unnecessary. The community college has such a great value proposition, yet we're making you like go through an escape room to get in the front door. It's crazy. It's
and
crazy.
Broward Up is a kind of disruptive way of thinking about access, because we're starting at a completely different point.
Trojan horse.
We're starting with non-credit classes, and then we're helping people also build confidence and competence, because they're sitting, you know, they're saying, I can't do college. I'm not going to jump through all those hoops. I'm not capable, or I don't want to.
Well, and you're also, but you're also competing with like edX, which was created by Harvard and MIT. You can take computer coding classes for $150 each, taught by absolute rock stars from MIT and Harvard. And you can sign up by click, credit card, you're in. That's what we're competing with. Right? It's interesting. There's a question, I typed in the answer, but I want to make sure that Ernestine asked this. Ernestine Ning, thank you for the question. Could we formulate a definition in entrepreneurship that's not limited to business startup? And I typed my response in there, and it's a really good question, Ernestine. I'm grateful that you asked it, because it took me 25 years to figure this out. But I define entrepreneurship as the self-directed pursuit of opportunity to create value for others. And, you know, the more value we create, the better off we're going to be. And what I like about that definition that speaks to your question, Ernestine, is that anyone can embrace that, whether they work in a fast food restaurant, a community college, or they want to change the world. It's an underlying assumption that it's up to me to figure out how to make myself useful to other humans. Like, that's really it at its essence, as far as I can tell. Now, you know, when you think about, people ask me a lot, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? And sometimes I like to answer by saying, what is a non-entrepreneurial mindset? Right? It's other directed value creation. And I think and there's nothing wrong with that per se, as long as we know we have options, that self-directed value creation is something that we're capable of.
That's interesting. I think that's a great definition. I think that would be a really great thing to take to a faculty group too, to, say, I always think that if you're going to kind of have a vision or a mission statement or anything, that it's really helpful to have a starting place. So I love that you have that really well thought through starting place of what is a definition of entrepreneurship, for just not, because it is a part of our messaging. It's not only for people that want to start up, right? Imran, we say that. And I think that's a great way to do it.
An entrepreneurial mindset, it ain't just for entrepreneurs. How's that for a tagline?
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Right. And that's what I meant when I said we've got to, like, I've been saying this a lot lately. It's 99% mindset. It's 1% entrepreneurship. If we can just get folks to understand that you're looking at the world through a lens, and that lens of which you're mostly unaware is creating the outcomes in your life. That's 99% of the work. And then what we're doing, the work that all of us are doing, is then we're showing them the deeply held beliefs and assumptions of a typical entrepreneur and saying, here, there's another buffet over there. Go look at their beliefs and assumptions and take whatever you want from that little buffet and leave the rest. It's just that simple to my way of thinking.
Tariq, that's a great kind of practical question. He's asking about how folks work with us and how their funding comes through. Rather than taking up time on this, because that's kind of diverging from the point of the conversation, I'm happy to set up a call with you. Feel free to email me at my email. I'll put that in the chat again. I did want to highlight a comment from Trish, though, agreeing with you, Mildred, Dr. Coyne, that kind of an interdisciplinary pathway, what you were talking about just a moment ago. And her question is, concerns entrepreneurial articulation with local high schools. Are you informally collaborating with folks like Nifty, as well as our work, to work with the broader community beyond just students at Broward College, but working in the K-12 and frankly, continuing education beyond your non-credit hour stuff as well?
Well, we have a great relationship with our school district. I'm going to let Imran answer specifically around the articulation work that he's leading for BCEx. Go ahead, Imran.
Sure. Yeah, no, and it's a great question. To our faculty coordinator, Trish, longtime Broward College professor, English professor, by the way, who's a core contributor to our entrepreneurial work. So appreciate the question. No, that's
a huge testament to what you guys are doing, by the way.
We have an English professor, we have a philosophy professor, Josh Kimber, we have folks from every background, and I love that.
That's an indication that you're moving from the perimeter to the core, that you guys get it. That's a huge testament to what you guys are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, our faculty is amazing. No, we in our wildest dreams, right? We would build. When I first joined, I was like, why don't we build out this high school program? Blah, blah, blah. And Dr. Coyne was like, let's work on the college program, and then we'll talk about the high school program. I said, got it. So we got
one thing at a time.
So we pretty much got the model down for the college, and in the past 6 months to a year, we've been very intentionally working with a few partners, right? So I can recommend these. One, I agree, Dr. Coyne, your local school district's a no-brainer. What we did strategically also to identify high schools in our county that have existing entrepreneurship programs, building partnerships with them to say, hey, your students can continue your education at Broward College. One, we're a heck of a lot cheaper than going anywhere else for your first 2 years of college, or if you get a bachelor's all the way through. Two, you can continue your entrepreneurial work. So we've kind of identified schools to partner with, but then there's great organizations like Nifty. We've done some work with Junior Achievement. We've partnered with very closely. Their local affiliate is right on campus at our North Campus. And then the bigger goal now, the next challenge, is to have our accelerator completers get their experience articulated over for college credit. So I have a team and a faculty team leading it to identify the learning outcomes and make sure it's airtight, so that when a student completes the accelerator, they've completed the requirements for a technical certificate in entrepreneurship under marketing. And so the idea being that a student can come in, get their 12 credits of college credit, build their business. Hey, that's an incentive to just roll right over into the college. And then we're building that model through BCEx, and we're hoping to apply that in other areas. And one of those areas is junior achievement, right? They have a great, robust K through 12 program. Hey, if we can get their accelerator to mirror the checkpoints and the landmarks of our curriculum, a graduating senior could finish the JA accelerator with 12 Broward College credits, right? Which one is more powerful for that student, but two, what a great incentive to then roll right into our higher ed institution. And it builds that relationship early. So that's the next frontier is really tying that relationship with our local K through 12, specifically higher ed institutions.
So Imran, I want to build on what you just said, and I don't want this point to get lost. The desire to fulfill human needs is a really, really powerful motivational force. The desire to fulfill human needs through our own effort creates a very powerful incentive to learn. And I don't like, I just, that's really, you've seen it again and again and again. Once people kind of understand this entrepreneurial framework, all their other academic achievement scores tend to go up.
Yeah.
Right? They become self-directed learn. That's like one of the most potent, powerful, yet unspoken, undervalued aspects of entrepreneurship education. And there's an important distinction to be made here. And I think, Mildred, you started talking about this maybe early on, or maybe even before we hit record. I don't remember now, but what a lot of folks call entrepreneurship is really small business management.
Yes.
And we've got to disentangle. I think that's when you started, like you said, when you started the program, it was like we were kind of teaching small business stuff.
We are. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part. Like what you guys fully understand at Broward, but the rest of the world needs to understand is that entrepreneurial skills and managerial skills are really very different things. And the attitudes and skills and the motivation to discover opportunities are completely distinct from the attitudes and skills required to exploit that opportunity, right? The latter being managerial, the former being entrepreneurial. Go ahead, Imran.
Dr. Coyne, you want to jump in first? I'll follow you.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that ties into what you mentioned earlier, Gary, that I didn't respond to, about the idea of a quote unquote work ethic, right? Because what we are really instilling in these students is a confidence, a self-confidence in their ability. And like we teach through ELI, you turn a challenge into an opportunity.
It's self-efficacy, 100%.
Over and over again. And so when you instill that in a student that enters an accelerator, which is already a scary word, right? I'm entering a startup accelerator. Not only do they enter it, and I know our instructor, our longtime partner, Terry Bentley's in the room. We joke that we have a good cop, bad cop routine. He's the drill sergeant, I'm the nice guy. But it's very tough because guess what? Launching a business is tough. But when you complete it, these students leave with a belief in their own ability that is unmatched. So regardless of whether they launch the business or not, whatever they go on to do, they say, you know what? I freaking survived BCEx. I can do whatever I need to do. I built a PowerPoint reputation. I built a PowerPoint. I presented to a pitch panel. I'm good. I'm confident. And
well, Imran, you just spoke to the essence of it. What we're all talking around is human capital, untapped human potential. Like whether you start a business or you do something else, I really don't care. I mean, the real conversation that we're all trying to get to is, did you leverage your virtues in ways that contributed to your community and benefited you? In a way that benefits you. I mean, that's really what the conversation is about, in my view. It's really, starting a business is but one way to self-actualize. But the entrepreneurial mindset is really the key component, to my view.
Yeah, our students our BCEx cohort participants are just, they'll blow you away when they talk about their experience and now what they're doing. And some of them do have businesses, social enterprises, but some of them are, leading a the future business leaders of America at Broward College as a bachelor's degree student, that, you know, as a former veteran. I mean, they're doing incredible things because they have a complete confidence in their sense of purpose.
It's
It's
efficacy.
really-
That's it.
It's right.
That's really it. And yeah,
I have to change my mantra. Yeah.
yeah, that's a great place to stop. I know, Mildred, you got to jump on the hour. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this conversation. When you're going to have to have a follow up. I just love what you guys are doing. I want to share with the world you guys as an exemplar of how to shift entrepreneurship from the perimeter to the core of higher education. Thanks so much for being a part of this.
Well, thank you for including us.
Yeah, great partners. We appreciate you all.
And thanks
Thank
to
you.
everyone for chiming in.
Paul.
We'll follow up with a recording shortly. So thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.